Welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast, the show that empowers gay men to live their fullest, healthiest lives. Whether you're navigating relationships, mental health, intimacy, finances, career, or personal growth, Ken Howard, a licensed clinical social worker in California, certified psychiatric social worker, and ASEC certified sex therapist, is here to guide you with over 30 years of experience, specializing in gay male individuals, couples, and polycules. As the founder of gaytherapyla.com and gaycoachingla.com. And now, today's episode.
Hi, I'm Ken Howard, and welcome to the Gay Therapy LA podcast. Today, I want to talk about Gilligan's Island and the 7 deadly sins, what a 60s sitcom can teach gay men about shame, identity, and survival. You know, some of my podcast episodes, most of them come from my work with clients, and others come from patterns that I observe in gay male culture or even questions asked during client sessions. But this one started kind of unexpectedly over dinner with a friend who said, you know, Gilligan's Island is really about the 7 deadly sins, right? And I kind of laughed, but you know, once you hear it, you can't kind of unsee it or unhear it. You know, that campy, lighthearted sitcom from the 1960s, complete with coconut radios and sequin gowns and slapstick hijinks, suddenly transforms into a kind of Jungian morality play. Or perhaps more precisely, a commentary on what happens when disparate parts of the human psyche or cultural archetypes are exiled together in a kind of liminal space. For gay men, especially those of us who grew up during or shortly after that era, the metaphor isn't just entertaining, it's deeply relevant. So for younger guys, what was Gilligan's Island? If you don't know what that is, Gilligan's Island was a popular American sitcom on TV that aired from 1964 to 1967, created by a guy named Sherwood Schwartz. Later created the Brady Bunch, by the way. It followed the comedic misadventures of 7 people stranded on a desert island in the South Pacific after a 3-hour tour of the Hawaiian Islands cruise goes awry in a storm. And the cast of characters included a bumbling first mate, young, cute guy, Bob Denver, who was Gilligan. There was a pompous millionaire couple played by Jim Backus, who was an old character actor, and Natalie Schaefer. A sultry movie star played by Tina Louise. A sweet farm girl who was played by Dawn Wells. An overbearing captain played by Alan Hare Jr., whose father was a popular actor going way back, and a brilliant but kind of impractical professor, kind of the hot one, played by Russell Johnson. So despite countless inventive attempts to escape or signal for rescue, the castaways remain trapped on this beautiful but very isolating desert island. And the show over time became a cultural icon, you know, equal parts absurd and charming and formulaic. For today's viewers, it's available, I think, on DVD or digital streaming services like Amazon Prime or YouTube clips as well. And sure, it's gloriously dated, but in a way that lends itself to camp appreciation, you know, something gay men have known how to mine for emotional and symbolic and social value and just entertainment value. Let's talk a little bit about camp and queer culture. So camp is not just about kitsch or exaggerated style. As Susan Sontag famously explored, camp is a queer way of finding meaning through irony and performance and aesthetic rebellion. So Gilligan's Island, with its cartoonish characters and repetitive plots and tonal innocence, fits perfectly into the camp tradition. Gay men have historically taken what mainstream culture offered us in coded form and turned it into something subversive or emotional or liberating. From Bewitched to Dynasty to The Golden Girls, we have often found identity and humor and survival in the marginalia of pop culture. Gilligan's Island can be seen very similar. It's a lighthearted farce hiding a surprisingly resonant set of symbols. So let's talk about the seven deadly sins and kind of the shipwrecked edition. Pop theologians and media critics alike have noted that each of the seven castaways can be mapped into the seven deadly sins, the Christian idea that there are seven deadly sins that are especially forbidden in Judeo-Christian culture. So number one of these characters is the skipper, played by Alan Hale Jr., who represents wrath, the loud, impulsive, and constantly yelling at Gilligan, his first mate. His wrath isn't just anger, it's frustrated authority, often erupting when control is lost. He embodies the masculine rage that many gay men both fear and internalize. Number two is Gilligan himself. He represents Sloth, well-meaning but consistently sabotaging rescue efforts. His bumbling is a form of passivity, resisting growth, accountability, or change. His sloth reflects the learned helplessness that some queer people experience in oppressive systems. Mr. Howell, of course, represents greed, a millionaire lugging cash to a place where money is meaningless. His obsession with wealth and status becomes a satire of privilege and detachment in society. Number four, with Mrs. Howell, represents gluttony, not for food, but for indulgence, for social comforts and luxury and status. Her gluttony is about consuming ease, even in survivalist scenarios. It speaks to a desire for control and elegance in a chaotic world. Number five is Ginger, represents lust, the glamorous movie star in sequins and heels, exuding sexuality even without an audience. Ginger is lust with a wink. She represents the power of erotic presence and the danger and delight of owning one's sexuality without apology. Number six, the professor, Pride, the cerebral inventor who can build a lie detector from bamboo, but he can't fix a boat. His pride lies in his intellect, detached from emotional or practical results. He's kind of a cautionary tale about knowledge without humility. And then last seven, Marianne is Envy, the sweet, competent farm girl who never quite gets Ginger's spotlight. She's longing to be seen and valued or envied for herself. And her envy speaks to the ache of invisibility that's very familiar to many gay men. Let's talk about the sins of being gay, our legacy of shame. For gay men, the seven deadly sins are not abstract theological concepts, they're inherited shame scripts. We are taught that our desires and our aesthetics and joy and even our anger were suspect. In the seven deadly sins, the lust, we're condemned for our sexual desires. For pride, we're told not to be too visible. In Pride season in June, pride is on the list of seven deadly sins. That's kind of used against us, of saying, oh, you're too visible. Don't flaunt it in everyone's face. And they label any kind of existence, any kind of invisibility from the bigot side of things as being too visible. In other words, the only thing that would satisfy them would be complete invisibility or even eradication. Gluttony, we're criticized sometimes for our love of nightlife or fashion or fun pop cultural indulgences. Wrath, dismissed as hostile or radical when we're advocating for our rights. Or envy, we're encouraged to envy straight relationships or cisgender hetero privilege. Greed, labeled as selfish or decadent. Sloth, we're called irresponsible or narcissistic for choosing pleasure or self-care tactics. So these aren't just cultural jabs, they are moral wounds that gay men experience. And they sort of linger in the emotional lives of gay men many decades after adolescence. Let's talk a little bit about Gilligan's Island as a queer allegory. So seven strangers shipwrecked together, forced to make a home outside of society. They build rituals and roles and hierarchies and coping strategies. Does that maybe sound familiar? So whether it's, drag clubs or leather clubs or therapy groups or friend pods, gay men often build a family of choice in exile from traditional systems. And like these castaways, we sometimes sabotage our own rescue. There's fear of intimacy, there's internalized phobias, there's the internalized critic, internalized homophobia, there's perfectionism. We cling to old survival strategies, or we get stuck in roles that no longer serve us. So some of us are gingers, owning sexuality to reclaim power. Some are Mariannes, overlooked but steady. Some are professors who using intellect to avoid vulnerability. And some are Gilligans, good-hearted but afraid of agency and actual success. So who are you on the island? In internal family systems therapy, we view the self as composed of many parts. Each character on the island can be one of your internal family systems cast members. There's the indulgent part that seeks beauty, like Ginger. There's the angry part that wants justice, the skipper. There's the overlooked part, longing to shine and be visible and achieve status, especially socially, and that's Marianne. And there's the prideful part, hiding behind intellect, the professor. Gay men who are super achievers, almost as a defense against the devaluation that we receive as gay men from the time we grow up. So which role were you cast in growing up? Which role do you think you unconsciously play today? What might that look like if you rewrote that script? Therapy is the rewrite. It's the slow, sometimes frustrating, deeply transformational work of integrating those parts, not punishing them. Let's talk about therapy as the raft, not the rescue copter. For every episode of Gilligan's Island, it ends the same way. There's no rescue. No matter how elaborate the professor's gadgets, they remain stuck on that island. Why? Because real escape doesn't come from cleverness. It comes from transformation. In therapy, we're not building coconut radios. We're learning how to listen to the castaways inside you. We're building a raft. So as a gay men's therapist and coach, I help clients with challenging the internalized shame messages or reclaiming the value, in so-called sins. We build an internal world that feels less like exile and more like home. So where religion condemns or social bigotry condemns, therapy accepts. Where society judges, therapy reflects. And where shame silences, therapy speaks. Let's reflect a little bit. Which castaway do you identify with most? And why is that? Are you still living by a moral script that no longer fits who you are today? Who are the castaways in your chosen family or in your community? Where do you see the other castaways and the people that you know? And then what's your version psychologically of building a raft of rescue from where you are now? So Gilligan's Island might be a comedy, but like many cultural campy artifacts, it carries an emotional truth wrapped in absurdity. It reminds us that being stranded doesn't mean being alone, and that exile can become a laboratory for transformation. So whether your island is an oppressive religious upbringing, or a conservative hometown, or a failed relationship, or just the residue of shame that won't wash off, you're not stuck forever. Let therapy be your raft. Let coaching be your compass. You don't need a rescue helicopter. You just need the willingness to do the work. And when you're ready to do that, I'm here for you. To get in touch with me, you can email ken@gaytherapyla.com if you're in California and you're eligible for therapy services, or gaycoachingla.com. And coaching can be in California or anywhere, any state or anywhere around the world. That's not regulated. And then we can talk more about what the differences between therapy and coaching and some of their purposes and exceptions to the rule kind of thing when we talk. there's some important legal and ethical and mission-based differences between those two services, but I'm well versed in both of those, in addition to things like being a certified sex therapist and being a former academic and teaching this stuff. So to reach me, you can email, or it's really faster to text me, and that's 310-339-5778. That's 310-339-5778. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.